Welcome to Stage Explorations, where we interview the theater creatives and artists from the theater world, those who perform on stage that the audience sees, and those behind the theater stage that the audience almost never sees. I am a journalist and theater fan, Buell Brown, and today's guest is...
I'm Jake Broder. If you want to learn more about UnRavelled, the new play, or the Global Brain Health Institute, go to unravelledplay.com or just watch this video.
When did you first fall in love with theater, and why did you have to become part of the theater world?
When did I fall in love with the theater? I think it hit me pretty young. I started out as a musician, and I knew when I was 5 that I wanted to play. That's what I wanted to do. And then that changed as I got older and became, I liked performing shows. And that became a love of acting, and then it became theater. It sort of, by the time I was 15 or 16, I was all in. But it started when I was pretty young.
When did you fall in love with writing, and when did it go from an interest to an obsession?
Writing always lived alongside music when I was young. The first thing I ever did was a newspaper called the Sloane Street Informer, which was it was a pencil local newspaper which I made when I was about 8, and ever since then I was writing stories. It's hard to sort of look at all these things as separate disciplines because it's all telling stories. Sometimes I'm inside it with my whole body, and sometimes I'm outside of it, imagining it and putting it down on paper. But it's telling stories, and that's always been the thing.
Why is playwriting format such a unique format to you? Why do you like writing in that format?
I like writing plays because because you can imagine anything, and there's no budgetary constraint. There's nothing standing in your way of actually making it happen, because it's just people in a space. And it can be as elaborate as you like, or it can be as simple as you like, but there's nothing standing in the way of you actually getting it done. And so that's part of the joy of it.
What is your writing process from the idea to finishing the play?
My writing process is, from beginning to end, is very different depending on the project. Sometimes there's a lot of research, and then it always starts with sort of like a lightning flash in the back of my head where I imagine it and I can almost see the whole thing, and it just sort of appears in the back. And it also is a needful feeling. It's like, oh, you have to do this story. And I can usually see it completely in my head. And then I have to spend a very long time learning about it and working it out to almost get back to exactly where I started from. Sometimes that can be really quick, and sometimes that takes a very long time.
Where did the story idea come from Unravel, and why did you have to write it?
UnRavelled had an interesting origin. It started when, it was for 3 reasons. I was listening to Radiolab, and they did a short piece about Anne Adams and Ravel. And it was one of those public radio driveway moments that they talk about during the fundraisers. I was stuck in the car until it was over. I couldn't get out. And by the time the piece was over, I imagined a story where Anne was going forwards in time and Ravel was going backwards in time, and the disease, and they had that in common, and the music and the painting, and sort of an exploration of the nature of creativity and their relationships, both in their separate worlds and with each other. And I just was swimming in it. I said, I got to tell this story. One of the people who was interviewed on that Radiolab show was Dr. Bruce Miller, and he's the world's foremost expert on frontotemporal dementia. So I wrote him a fan letter, and he, to my surprise, responded. And he asked me whether I was the Jake Broder from Silicon Valley. And I said, yeah. And we struck up a conversation about the case. He gave me a lot of material to read. I asked more questions. We went back and forth a bunch of times. And then he said, look, would you like to be the Hellman visiting artist at UCSF? And this was 2019, I think. And so I said, well, yeah. And they gave me this fellowship, and I went up there to study and interviewed everybody up there at the Memory and Aging Center, which is where Ann Adams was treated, but also it's where they do some of the most amazing research, both into the science and medical aspects of dementia, but also the care and the treatment of it on a very human level. And it's an extraordinary place. And it enriched my understanding of both what the disease is, what it isn't, what the human cost is, both to the sufferers, to the caregivers, to the people who love people who live with it. And it introduced me to a whole community of people who really just live with this in a very profound way. The second reason I had to do this story is because I think I got some skin in the game. Close family member might be looking down the barrel of this, and my grandma had it. She had Alzheimer's. And the prospect of somebody who you love so dearly losing what makes them them is a terrifying proposition. And it's something that a lot of people have to face. And there has to be a way of talking about it. There has to be a way of processing it and dealing with it. It's not something you can just, we can't just all sit alone in the dark and just be left to it. And the third reason is that we're reaching a point in human history where our bodies are outliving our brains for the first time. And brain health and dementia it's going to become more prevalent. It's going to become ubiquitous. Everybody's going to be dealing with it on some level because you're going to know somebody or love somebody who has it or be someone who has it, or we're living long enough to bump into the limitations of what our brains can do. And so we're going to have to reckon with these issues about dementia and brain health in a very real way, in a way that we've never had to before because we're living longer. So all of those things added up to me to be, I need to tell this story. I need to work on it. And I'm really grateful I had the opportunity from the UCSF and the GBHI, that's the Global Brain Health Institute, of which Dr. Bruce Miller is the head, co-head. They gave me the opportunity to do this, both to commission the play and then to take a crack at it in this extraordinarily strange pandemic-flavored way.
For those people who don't know the story, tell us the main story arc and the two characters, and also the themes of the story also.
To give you a sense of what UnRavelled is about, it's about, there is a 53-year-old woman. Her name is Dr. Ann Adams, and she is a brilliant biologist. And she's also a pretty crappy painter. And she, with her husband, has been living outside of Vancouver. And their son had a car accident. And when he did, she said, I'm going to stay home and take care of him because the prognosis was that he would never walk again. So she did. And while this was happening, she, wasn't in the lab anymore. And she said, I'm just going to paint. And she painted a lot of strawberries. She painted one obsessive thing over and over. And her husband was amused and annoyed, and it wasn't a big deal, but she wasn't a painter. So it was like, okay, fine. Then, miraculously, the son got better, and he went off to college. And so an unexpected happy ending there. So this is where we pick up the beginning of our story. And in UnRavelled, she says, look, she's playing Scrabble with her husband, and she says, look, I have a bit of an announcement. I'm not going to go back to the lab. And the husband's surprised. Well, why? Why not? It's like, because I want to paint. But you're not a painter. And she says, hey, don't you tell me what I can and can't do. And then begins she has this instinct that she wants to paint. And so it causes some friction in her marriage. And then she starts listening to Ravel's Bolero. And Bolero is a repetitive piece of music. It was written by Maurice Ravel in 1928. And it's not really like anything else he ever made. It's most of what Ravel does is very liquid. It's very impressionistic. He's like Debussy. It flows. And Bolero is very regimented, and it's almost perseverative. It's the same melody repeated X amount of times, exactly without variation, just the orchestration changes. There are people who think of it almost like an etude, or a piece that explores the meaning of what an orchestra can do rather than a piece of music in and of itself. And yet it is regarded as Ravel's most popular masterpiece. It's played all over the world all the time and has been since it was made. But Ravel hated it. So she becomes obsessed with this music and starts to paint it. And it's a secret. She keeps it a secret. And she's painting and painting and painting. And she makes up this gorgeous painting of it, which is so much better than anything she ever made before. And her husband is surprised and shocked and delighted. And this is like, wow, this is like a whole new person. And then she starts to show the symptoms. And then she starts to lose words. Her personality starts to shift slightly. It gets so bad at one point that she starts picking up the steak knife from the wrong end. She cuts herself. She forgets that she was just in a meeting and comes back again. And she starts to her speech starts to go, but her painting continues to improve. So they take her to see Dr. Bruce Miller, who diagnoses her with primary progressive aphasia. And it's a kind of dementia. And through the course of this, she discovers that Ravel had the same, at 53, Ravel was composed Bolero, which itself is the first symptom of his PPA, which he had, and he, like her, died 7 years later. And they both had the same disease, and they were both inspired by the same piece of music / art at the same point in their disease, which was a radical departure for them in terms of their creativity. And the theme of this is exploring the idea of what disease is, what creativity is, what is it to love somebody when they fundamentally change, where do the boundaries lie? And also share a story of a disease which has inside it a great and beautiful gift at the very beginning phases that teaches us hugely about the balance of the mind, in that at the beginning of this disease, language disappears just a little bit, which allows music and visualizing to come to the fore a bit more. And perhaps language is too prominent. Perhaps we're too focused on that, and that takes away from some of the other things that are necessarily having to take a back seat while language has the front of the stage all the time.
Do you think because of your more established knowledge of both music and writing that you were kind of like the perfect writer to write this story?
I don't know.
Or I should ask, because of your knowledge of music and the play, do you think you were more set or ready to write the story than others because you had a knowledge of both?
Well, what I can tell you about that is that a lot of times I wind up writing about music because the creation of it and its power is something that is obviously very close to my heart. And, you know, you write what you know. So stories that involve music, you know, hit me where I live. And I can understand them because I've lived inside that. I understand the frustration of not being able to compose something properly, or not being able to play something properly, or wanting to communicate something with music and not being able to. And so the drama of music is that it is the nature of its human expression that is both abstract and universal. And when there are problems with it, or things that want to come out through it, e.g. strong emotions or dysfunction, I find it easy to translate that into story. I've written musicals, and most of them are not sort of stop and sings, but they have the music inside the story itself. They're musicals about musicians. And this, I suppose, is a play about the creation of music and the struggle of a composer to reckon with his own legacy, and he's raging against the idea that the best thing that he ever created is only happening because he has a disease. And he knows it on some level. And the rest of the world values that piece, which is the thing he likes the least. And I don't know. I enjoy writing about and telling stories about the creation of music because I find it easy to live inside it.
Talking about living in this story, tell me about the actors and the creative team that helped bring this to this special screening.
Well, the actors and the creative team are magnificent. I'm so happy and honored to work with them. Nikki Dukas is a director here in Los Angeles who understands pacing and has such a good, austere sense of naturalism, and I really rate her. She's very, very good. The actors themselves, it's funny because the pandemic has yielded almost what I would call the pandemic players. I've written a few plays during this time, and we have the same group of people sort of dealing with them. My sort of pipe dream is to have a repertory company for Max and Willie's Last Laugh, Our American Hamlet, and UnRavelled. It's the same 8 or 9 actors who could do all 3 plays. And I just, in a way, I'm coming out of this pandemic having found the company of people who I'd like to sort of work with for the next 10 years. They're extraordinary. I'm not going to lie, I'm married to one of them, Lucy Davenport. She plays Anne. And she told me a long time ago when I was just starting to write this, she's like, I'm playing this part. And I said, no, okay. And I'm really glad she said that, because this speaks to her. Lucy's superpower is being able to track the finest gradations of behavior and emotion. She's so fine. And this is completely what this is about. This play is all about what is the difference between something that you choose and something that is almost like that you forgot to stop yourself. And it's all about, pathological behavior versus choices. And what does that mean? So it really speaks to her strengths as a performer. And then Connor Duffy, who plays Ravel, is just exquisite. He's an actor who I've worked with before, but he also is my dear writing partner on Max and Willie's Last Laugh. And then Rob Nagel, who is just grand. He's a mainstay of the theater here in LA, and he's worked with me before on Our American Hamlet, and I've always wanted to have him front something. So both Rob and Lucy are playing Robert and Ann Adams. So they're, the center of this, which is a very strong center. And then Leo Marks, who was in Our American Hamlet as well, playing Edwin Booth, he is playing Dr. Miller and is just great. He is one of the few people I know. He studies neuroscience too, and he really is very fluent in the idea of. He's very interested in consciousness, and so this appealed to him on a lot of levels, and I'm very thankful that he was there. Additionally, there was Melissa Greenspan, who is usually a very comic actress, and she brought a real sense of the brittle, angry desperation of one of the characters she played, and then the other one was a care nurse who she really just nailed so perfectly with a mix of sort of dry wit and compassion. And then finally, Mike Lanahan is doing the narration for this, and he has kind of been in everything I've written for the last 10 years. And he's just great to have around. Yeah, it's a really good group of people, and it's sort of the base of the cake of a group of people that I imagine I will be have worked with for a while, and will be working with for a lot longer. On the other side of the camera, there's Corwin Evans, who is an absolute whiz in live theater with projections, but in this whole format, he's creating animations and paintings and moving them all over the place. He's sort of in charge of the visual style of this, which is austere but kind of sumptuous because there's a lot of paintings and different time periods. And then Jeff Gardner is doing the sound, and I worked with him on Miravel, and we had a really, really, really good time because he is one of those sound designers who sort of reaches into the conceptual side of things and in a subtle way really enhances the story. In this, in the last show, I think there was some kind of, I don't know, like a fire alarm that became a symphony. And then in this one, we have one where, somebody's looking at some pages of a symphony and they are looking at different pages of it, and she can hear it inside her head, and then she turns the page, it's a different part of the symphony, but it's a reflection of the first one, and then she turns the page again, it's a different part of the symphony, and then she's looking at all the pages, and it's all playing together, and then she shuts the book, and it all sort of goes away. And that was Jeff sort of being really creative with the use of sound. And then holding it all together is Bree Pavey, who is a brilliant production coordinator and can, kept us on track and kept this sort of moving through and got us through shooting in OBS. And the remarkable thing about this is that we never, ever, ever were in the same room, any of us. Not one time. And Yeah, I was talking to Lucy about that last night. We were just sort of shocked that that actually was the case, because there was such intimacy, and yet it was all like this.
Well, very important question. What do you want the audience to get out of this play?
What do I want the audience to get out of this play? What I want with any story I tell, I want the audience to feel what I felt when I first heard it. I want them to be fascinated with the reality of it. I want to share with them the wonder and the beauty of this story and what it means. I want them to have empathy and sympathy for the people who struggle with this. And I want them to see that there is a magic that you never thought was there inside something that seems quite desperate and deadly.
Very important question. Why must the viewers watch the Unravel play event?
Why must people watch? Well, most plays about this subject are very sad, and most stories about this are heartbreaking. This endeavors to lift your heart up a bit, not just break it. And I think that's really, now that I think of it, that is what attracted me to this. This was a story about dementia that didn't break my heart. It actually made it grow a little bit. And I don't know, I think that's a rare thing.
You've mentioned them a lot because they're always sponsoring, but tell me why the Global Brain Health Institute is such an important institute, and why do you enjoy partnering with this play?
The Global Brain Health Institute is an important institution because it does exactly what it says in its title. It is a group of scientists and medical people and artists and all kinds of different folks who are concerned and are interested in brain health and equity in brain health. And they do it all over the world. And because we all have brains or love someone who does, the work they do affects all of us. And I don't know, as I said before, we're at the very beginning of understanding what the brain can do. We've been studying hearts for a long time. We can replace one with something mechanical. We understand all that. You can't say the same about brains. We're at the beginning of that mountain. And so, relatively speaking, so digging in there a bit is important work.
I probably should ask it sooner, but I had it lower down. How different and similar was the play creation comparing past plays like Lewis and Keely Live with Sahara play to a play like this? Were there similar to how you created it, or were they more different how you created it?
This play, UnRavelled, is I think it's sort of unique in the way it arrived as opposed to other plays like Louis and Keely or even our American Hamlet or Miravel. This is something that, I guess like some of them, it was based on a true story. So there was a lot of research to do. But my understanding of the story, I had to go and acquire a new sense of, I had to learn a hell of a lot in order to tell this story properly and to be able to do it in a way that kept the human part in front as opposed to having it become overwhelmingly scientific. And I hope I've succeeded. But it took me a very long time to understand something well enough to explain it simply. So there's a tremendous amount of research that I did where I just left on the floor. And it's, I got to trust that it's in there somehow because I don't get to show it in the play. or maybe it's there. I don't know. There's like the faith of that is important somehow. This was a real stretch. And this one was chiseled in a different kind of way, because every bit of behavior, every line, every stage direction, every moment was chiseled because it had to have a meaning. There's a set of paintings that track her degeneration and expansion over time. So I had to create the behavior and the relationships that made it from point A to point B that also could work on two levels. One, just two people feeling and reacting to each other, but another one was a track of sort of what the disease was doing and how it was manifesting. And so you could read it both ways at the same time. So there's a really taut wire between every little line. So this one was very chisely.
Now, I understand it's free, correct? The view, if I've read that. Tell me why it's free, and I'm assuming this is more for promoting the cause, but why it was decided to make it free. So.
Well, this happened. It sort of tumbled. It's interesting. The culmination of the Hellman Visiting Artist Fellowship was me turning in a script. And because of the pandemic, I thought, well, I can't just turn in a script. That's just too boring. I wanted to, let the people hear what was being considered. So we had a reading of it on Zoom and just shared it with people from the GBHI. And then they said, would you like to do this again? And I said, yeah. And we thought, well, I think in a way, this is, when this grows up, this play wants to be performed at, the Queen Elizabeth Hall or the Disney Concert Hall with the stage in front and then the symphony behind, because the whole evening results in a performance of Bolero with a gigantic version of the painting behind, but you get to hear a symphony do it. And what we're actually at, the dramatic conceit, is that we're at her memorial service. But you've spent an hour and a half with her, so now you understand what her masterwork means and what Ravel's masterwork means and how they interact with each other. And then you get to experience them at the same time in a room full of people. That will be, I think, moving. So because of COVID, we had to do this online, and they offered a budget to do it. And I'm serving as producer on this, and I just produced the thing, thinking that, frankly, it didn't occur to me to try and monetize this, because this was being academically, or institutionally funded. So creating a piece of work that, that the GBHI can use to make people more aware of their cause is great. But this was just sort of created. This is the same piece of work that it would be if this was being done by a commercial entity that was charging tickets. So it's free because it's free, but that really isn't changing what the thing is, if that makes sense.
Is there anything else I missed about the play or the creation of it that people should know about it?
It's one of those things that if you start Googling the story, it's one of those really great rabbit holes. So look up Unraveling Bolero and Google that. Enjoy. I'm Jake Broder. If you enjoyed this chat and you want to see Unraveled, you can go to unravelledplay.com. That's unraveled with 2 L's. And that's unravelledplay.com, and see it.
Welcome to Stage Explorations, where we interview the theater creatives and artists from the theater world, those who perform on stage that the audience sees, and those behind the theater stage that the audience almost never sees. I am a journalist and theater fan, Buell Brown, and today's guest is...
I'm Victor Valcour. I'm the Executive Director for the Global Brain Health Institute and the Atlantic Fellows for Equity in Brain Health, as well as Professor at University of California, San Francisco. If you'd like to learn more about our institute or the play, watch this video.
My first question is, when was the Global Brain Institute created and what is its main mission?
The Global Brain Health Institute started in 2015 to enroll fellows. We began thinking about it back in 2013, maybe even before that. The idea is that across the world, dementia is a grand challenge. It is increasing in frequency around the world, largely in low middle-income countries because these countries have aging populations. And dementia is one of the most costly diseases in the world. It costs in the United States more than the total cost of cancer, heart disease, and stroke combined. A lot of the costs are informal costs, so they're taken up by caregivers, families. Oftentimes people have to give up their jobs to caregive for families, and oftentimes the people giving up their jobs are women. Just one of the many inequities in dementia care. The inequity in the fact that much of the increased prevalence of dementia will be in low middle income countries that may not have economies to support these costs. Also the inequities in the disease itself, which seems to be more frequent in women. And then the inequities of care. We haven't even started with the determinants of a healthy brain, and the social determinants of a healthy brain are linked to disparity. So we really are an equity program. And that's why our core training program is called the Atlantic Fellows for Equity in Brain Health. And the Atlantic Fellows for Equity in Brain Health, now we have over 140 fellows from more than 40 countries that spend time with us using an equity lens to understand dementia and how we can approach this grand challenge. But it's to promote health for aging populations around the world.
As a founder, what is your hopes and goal for the Institute?
We're a global program and we're an interdisciplinary program. And as I said, we're an equity program. So our primary goal is to train the next generation of leaders to address this grand challenge worldwide. We hope to train as many as 600 leaders around the world to address the issue of brain health, and particularly in communities that are underserved, otherwise don't have access to care, to address major challenges in those areas. To date, 140 fellows in over 40 countries is quite an achievement. Each of the fellows spends a year with us. And as I've mentioned before, they come from every discipline you could imagine. And this is why the arts are so critical to us. We have artists that come into our program, and they are absolutely critical, not only in therapeutic sense, but in advocacy and awareness. Our partnerships, for example, with the San Francisco Conservatory of Music increases our stage of awareness of diseases. And plays like UnRavelled increase awareness of these diseases that affect the brain in a way that we capture audiences that we otherwise wouldn't be able to. To be able to firmly address this grand challenge, we need everybody. Anybody with zeal, anyone with energy, anybody who is trying to address this issue from whatever lens, whatever approach they're coming from, to come together and create a community that is working collaboratively.
Tell me about the Hellman program and how did that lead to UnRavelled?
The Hellman Visiting Artist Program has been around in the Memory and Aging Center for many years. This has been an incredible opportunity to bring artists into the space of our Memory and Aging Center. The Memory and Aging Center is a leading center for clinical care, education, and research in the United States. And by bringing in artists, we do many different things. It helps us to think better about our research. It helps us to think better about our education approaches, and certainly has helped us with understanding the lived experience of dementia and the work that has been done. But I also think it's nurtured us as investigators and as clinicians, brings us together with common themes, and nurtures, keeps us healthy ourselves. This is a brainchild of my boss, Dr. Bruce Miller, who has always had a lens of bringing in the arts into the work that he's done. Since the day I joined the Memory and Aging Center 15 years ago, this has been part of his narrative. It's also quite instrumental in how it formulated our approach to the Global Brain Health Institute, which sits in the Memory and Aging Center. I credit to a large degree the multidisciplinary approach that we're taking to brain health protection strategies, to the experiences that I've had, particularly with the Hellman Visiting Artist Program, but through the values that Dr. Bruce Miller has held and brought to the programs at the Memory and Aging Center.
Just tell me as much of the history as you know about the connection between Miller, the playwright, and how this play came about.
I know a little bit about the relationship with Jake Broder and Dr. Bruce Miller, but I'm certainly not an expert on this. The content of the play has been around for a long time. Dr. Bill Seeley and Bruce Miller published a paper in this space, I think around 2005. I had read that paper as an early faculty member at the Memory and Aging Center. And it essentially talks about the story of this play, an individual whose art changed substantially in the setting of a neurodegenerative syndrome. And what was really very exciting about it, I don't know if I probably shouldn't give the punchline away. You need to come and watch the play because there's a twist that connects this patient and the art that she creates that is just unmatched and almost gives you goosebumps thinking about it. We have leveraged this story for a large event in San Francisco, and I think Jake Broder had become interested in it before that and really wanted to bring this to the stage. And I think part because of the exciting story that underlies it. To us, it really highlights the emergence of creativity in the setting of neurodegenerative disorders, and is a really strong advocacy platform for us to raise awareness of these neurodegenerative disorders.
Why is it important that this story is being seen online for free for the public? Why is it so important to be seen?
It's important that this program be seen online for a large audience because it will help us to raise awareness with larger audiences than we can get into one performance, and certainly magnitudes of cost saving and scaling that are possible. So I'm particularly excited about this and our ability to share it worldwide. One of the showings will be in connection with an international conference on dementias, and I hope that will bring in a large international audience. The added benefit there as well is an opportunity for the Global Brain Health Institute to lead in the narrative that arts are critically important in our mission to protect the world's aging populations from threats to brain health. That's critical for us, that we lead and show by example how important it is to work with all groups of people to advance our mission of protecting the world's aging population from threats to brain health.
What do you want the audience to get out of the play?
Well, I think the audience will certainly get an incredible entertainment opportunity. The storyline is one that has twists and turns, and as I mentioned before, almost gives me goosebumps thinking about how this all comes together. I understand that the actors are phenomenal, so I'm absolutely certain the performance will be amazing. I also think that the people who watch the event will learn a little bit about specific neurodegenerative syndromes, that dementia can present in many different ways, not solely with loss of memory, but can present with behavioral changes, can present with language changes. So that degree of awareness, I think, will be very important for people to get out of it. And as I mentioned before, I think the intersection between science and the entertainment of this opportunity is also critically important in terms of a mechanism, a narrative in which we can increase awareness broadly, working together collaboratively across silos, not within our silos.
Why must or should people watch this play?
People should watch this play to learn a little bit about a neurodegenerative syndrome, and also to be entertained by a really fascinating story, to learn a little bit about the possibility of emergence of creativity in the setting of neurodegenerative disorders, There are many compelling reasons to watch this. I'm particularly excited to see the quality of the performance, which I'm absolutely certain will be outstanding, and the entertainment value of this will be incredibly high, and at the same time, an educational opportunity.
Why are local research hospitals and local theaters so important and needs the community's help and support?
Local community theaters and hospitals being together as a needed contributions to our communities. It's an interesting mashup. We've certainly seen recently with the COVID epidemic how critically important it's been to have outstanding hospital systems in our community. And particularly here at University of California, San Francisco, we've been incredibly fortunate to have some of the brightest minds addressing this huge challenge. And I think the community services is really quite amazing. The arts are just as critical to a healthy society, to a healthy community, to be able to elevate narratives and to bring people together in a way that is inspiring and collaborative. I think both. It's interesting to see the mashup in your question of including both the hospital systems and local theaters, and they're both critically important for, in some ways, many of the same reasons, nurturing a healthy society.
Is there anything I missed out you want to mention about the Institute or about the play that we think people need to know about?
The Global Brain Health Institute is located both in the University of California, San Francisco, and in Trinity College in Dublin. This partnership of two founding sites supports the training of international fellows, Atlantic fellows, from every discipline that you can imagine, including arts, anthropology, nursing, clinical care, like neurologists, geriatricians, neuroscientists, and entrepreneurs of different types. We bring people together every year, about 40 at the two sites, and they spend a year together trying to create a network and a community. And I like to think of it as a think tank where they learn and think with each other about the challenges in their community. And by learning across disciplines and across regions, novel ideas are bound to come up. We champion our Atlantic Fellows to achieve change in their community, which I think is a novel way of addressing a global challenge. Instead of coming up with the solutions, we don't do that. We create a lot of content and opportunities for them to create solutions that will work culturally within the communities that they work in. And this is a really strong piece of what we are at the Global Brain Health Institute. If you've enjoyed this discussion and want to learn more about our institute or the play, join us, occurring online and open to all.
Welcome to Stage Explorations, where we interview the theater creatives and artists from the theater world, those who perform on stage that the audience sees, and those behind the theater stage that the audience almost never sees. I am a journalist and theater fan, Buell Brown, and today's guest is...
Hi, I'm Lucy Davenport, and I'm here being interviewed about the play UnRavelled. If you'd like to find out some more about the play itself, please join us for this conversation.
When did you first fall in love with theater, and why did you have to be part of the theater world?
I think that I was very lucky in that I fell in love with theatre because my parents, although they were both doctors, took me to the theatre a lot when I was a child. And the one that really sticks out in my mind is going down. I lived in the north of England and I went down to London to see the Royal Shakespeare Company do Nicholas Nickleby, which was this epic, legendary production. It was over 6 hours. You went in the afternoon, you went for a dinner break, and then you went back. I must have been about 8 or 9, I think, and I just wanted it never to stop, this world that they created on there. And I think that ever since then, I just had a love of it. Or I also have to give a caveat that my parents, though they're both doctors, they met at the theatre club at medical school, so it's their fault. It's totally their fault. And I think that it was very interesting. I was at a school that I did lots of theatre at school, but no one had mentioned to me that drama school was a thing. It just wasn't on the agenda. So I went to college, I did my 3-year degree, and then I was like, well, how do I become an actor? And some people do go straight from college, but I didn't do a drama degree. So then I went to drama school, and that was when I really made the decision to make it a profession as opposed to just dabbling around the edges.
And from that, when did you fall in love with acting, and when did it go from an interest to an obsession?
I would say I fell in love with acting very early. I used to make my brother and sister do plays with me, which involved dressing my poor brother up as a girl. He was always the maid or the one who was being bossed around. And we had a little alcove in our house, which my parents put a curtain across. So we used to do little plays on Sunday afternoons and make all the parents sit through them. And I think from then on, I've always loved it. I think I knew that I wanted to do it when I was probably older, 17 or 18. But then again, it just takes a while to understand how you get, when your parents aren't in the business, to understand how you get into it. So I think I made that leap probably when I was about 16. I decided that I would do all arts A-levels, which is the last exams you do in England, and more profoundly when I was at college, where I did my degree, but I also did 28 plays, some of them very badly. And that was, so it's kind of an informal training. I did everything. I did Shakespeare, I did Neil Simon, I did just everything at the Edinburgh Festival. So I think at that point I was like, yes, this is how I'm going to lead my life.
Why is acting in theater such a unique format for actors?
I think acting on stage as opposed to on film is unique because you have that immediate feedback. And I think that's what you miss most during the last 18 months when that hasn't been possible. I was actually rehearsing for a play when the pandemic hit and it got shut down. But you get an immediate feeling of feedback from the audience. And it's more than feedback, it's like you're having an experience together. And it's being in that room and feeling the electricity in the air and feeling the gasps or the in-breaths of the audience, or the, sometimes the laugh, or a sort of an exclamation, and at the end feeling how profoundly you've changed that space and their minds, hopefully, or just even entertained them and had some experience together. And film, it's a very delayed reaction you get. You don't know immediately. And I did a lot of theatre in my early years. God, that makes me sound about 85. In my early years. So I got used to that very immediate feedback, that feeling of companionship that you have when you watch something in the theatre, that you can look at the whites of their eyes and you can feel when something works. And in film, it's just a very different way of approaching the work, because you're not looking for that feedback, you're not looking for that companionship, you're looking to sort of preserve something in the moment for later. So I think that's why, for me, theatre will always be part of my sort of, I've no reason to ever want to stop doing theatre because of that. And that's what I miss doing this year, to be honest.
How is it different developing the character for a play? So how's it different, and why is it unique to you?
Well, I think that if you're developing a character for any medium, you've got to go through a process. And I was very lucky that my drama school gave you like a whole box of tools that you can use, and you pick the ones that worked for you. I would say that a theatre, when you're preparing to play a character for theatre, you just have the luxury of rehearsal, which is that you can try things out. You can really, you can take your time and build layers. They actually once at drama school told us to do a pie chart. And the pie chart could be like, okay, this is like 30% Cruella de Vil plus, 20% Lady Macbeth with a bit of, so you'd actually really develop this kind of amalgamation of things that and she walks like this and she wears these shoes, and you actually get to practice that and, see if it works. And so it's a very gradual process of building up layers. In film, you have to do that kind of privately as you prepare your own script. And you get a lot more props on the outside. You know, they'll literally transform you into looking like the person that you're supposed to be. And you'll step into a set where that will be exactly the room that you're supposed to be in. But it's almost immediate. You have to find that where you are, and find that character in a much more private, and you don't get to try it out so many times. Sometimes you do. I've done films where we do have rehearsal, but that's the big difference for me. I enjoy both for different reasons, but I definitely enjoy the process of slowly building layers that you get in rehearsal.
And do you also like it because you do multiple performances per play, whether it's for a week or months? Are you always surprised how your character develops even during the whole play run?
Yes, I mean, I think what's interesting about doing a long run of a play is that you have this tension. And I have done, a show where I've been playing the same character for a year. The tension becomes that you become so used to it, and so it's like second nature to you. You've got to still keep your eye on where you were at the beginning, otherwise the performance becomes too unfocused. But also just the joy of discovering things as you go along, finding places that work, building, without kind of jeopardizing the arc that you've built for your character or other people's performance. And also you just get to be a lot naughtier. If you're doing a long run of a play, you can really commit to the performance, but you can also be trying to make your colleagues laugh and doing bad things upstage, which, I think when you're doing a long run, you're doing 8 shows a week, which is a lot, keeps it fresh, keeps it enjoyable, in a way that doesn't impact the audience's enjoyment, but makes it fun for you to keep it alive.
I'm one of those theater audience geeks. I love going to see it multiple times. I always try to see it at the beginning, end, and middle to see how things change. It might be minor, but I feel good because most people want to go to theater performance once. I like going to see, okay, they did this different. And sometimes it's the writer, because some of the good writers, they'll just, if they're actually there, they adjust it too. So I think it's really
cool. Totally. And they can it can be like a process of development, that's really exciting, especially when you're doing a new play. I think that is really important because you start to see what works.
And to add to that, my next question is, when did you first read a play by playwright Jake Broder, and why do you love his writing?
Well, I first read a play by Jake Broder probably in around 2001 when I met him. And full disclosure, I married him in 2004 and I'm still married to him. So I've read everything that he's written since then. We have a very collaborative sort of relationship, which is one of the great things about working together, is that we really enjoy it. We really thrive on that. I usually am the first person to read something when he's finished it. And then it becomes a process of going back and forth. So when I come to it as an actor, I've already done a lot of work on the script, which is really lovely. And I don't have to dive into a script that's completely new to me. The process is also, I have to make a shift from being an editor really to being an actor. And at that point, I have to stop thinking about whether this works in this arc or changing the words. I have to commit to what's on the page. Jake's writing is always complex. He does not like to preach to the audience or, over-explain anything. He likes to leave the audience to catch up and make their own decisions, which I love. I love that space in the work to do that. And he's also not afraid of big topics. I think that, his work looks at all kinds of things from, school shootings to Alzheimer's and all those related diseases. And I just enjoy the range of that. Jake also trained we were actually at rival drama schools in London. He trained in England, so we have a lot of the same vocabulary. And that's really hugely useful. So we both come from a basis of that English theatre training, and then we have transformed that, hopefully successfully, into all other mediums. But still, we have this basis in theatre, which I think is really, we have a lot of the same tools, a lot of the same feelings about what works. And we saw a lot of the same theatre at the same time.
When did you first hear about the story UnRavelled, and then when did you have to be part of the UnRavelled productions? Why was it you had to?
I first heard about the story of UnRavelled when Jake came in from the car, where he was like half an hour later than he should have been. I said, where have you been? And he said, I was sitting in the car listening to the radio. And they'd had this small segment on Radiolab about the relationship between Anne Adams, who is the protagonist in UnRavelled, and Ravel, who wrote Bolero. And he came in and he was completely fired up, and he immediately that evening went away and researched it. So from that point onwards, I was really interested in the story because it's fascinating. This scientist who suddenly started painting, and then seemed to have this whole like different life open up ahead of her, which then became intertwined with the disease that she was suffering from. And I can't remember exactly when I was like, I think I need to play Anne. I think maybe when I read the first draft and I thought it's one of those parts, it's written for a mature woman. That makes me sound about 85 again. Someone who's very smart, someone who's, hopefully I could do that. But it was, and Jake did tell me afterwards, not when I first read it, but afterwards, that he had me in mind when he wrote it. So that was really useful. I read it and I was like, I completely get this person. I know where they're coming from. I know what their background is. Sometimes you get that as an actor where you just there's not a lot of work involved. You don't have to do a massive amount of like imagining yourself as that person, because you just are. And when I read the first draft, I think I was like, oh, I have to play Anne. And I think I did say to Jake, I was like, you're not doing this without me. And he was like, yeah, that's fine. I can't always say that. I have to be careful because I can't be just like every part that I fancy in his work be like, oh, I hosey that. That's mine. Because it has to be serving the work. But this one I knew that I could hopefully do justice to it. So I just told him very clearly that he wasn't doing it without me.
And for those people who don't know the story, can you explain a little bit of the story arc, especially from your character's point of view?
So in UnRavelled, the story really is about Anne Adams, who is a preeminent scientist. She's been led her own cell line. She's been a real sort of light in the world of biology for years and years. And then her son had a very traumatic car accident and I don't think they thought he was going to live. And after going through rehab, he had to come home and recover. So Anne decided to leave her job and look after him and help him recover, which he did, which is amazing. Now, while she was at home helping him recover, she started to paint. And I'm going to slip into I now because I'm so close to this character. I think that I started to paint and it was very prosaic things. I painted strawberries and it wasn't honestly very good. But sometime in this period, after her son was recovered and in fact went back to college, she started painting in a completely different style and became obsessed with the piece of music Bolero by Ravel and would play it over and over and over again. And she started to paint it. She started to translate that piece of music into a visual piece. And this was absolutely completely different from anything she'd done before. And at the end, you reveal this piece, and it really is astonishing. It's completely different in style from anything she'd ever done, and it was so good that she even got it shown in a gallery. And her husband, who she was very close to, at this stage is, excited by this painting, bemused by it, not really understanding where this complete change of focus came from. And as she goes on and starts to paint other things that happen to her or abstract things she translates into paintings, she starts to get other symptoms. She starts to lose words. She seems to not be able to communicate what she's thinking. So eventually, after lots of resistance from Anne, her husband takes her to a neurologist, and they find out that she's actually suffering from a form of dementia called prefrontal aphasia. And this is a very cruel disease where slowly your ability to speak goes, and then slowly also you lose the ability to function physically, to point, to hold things, and then eventually to breathe. But what is the extraordinary thing about this was that this disease, which was really a death sentence, and a horrible, horrible discovery for both her and her husband, had also unlocked this amazing creativity in her. And I think the play explores what happens when someone you love is sick, or what happens when you are sick, with something that you know is going to kill you, but it's also freed you to do something beautiful. And I think that a lot of people can really connect with this, because almost all of us are going to have the experience of having someone we love get Alzheimer's or a form of dementia, because our bodies are outliving our brains. We're living so much longer, that we have this whole uncharted territory between 80 and 110 now, where we're all going to get really, really old because medicine can keep us alive longer. But how will our brains cope with that? And the experience of caring for someone with a degenerative disease, or being someone with a degenerative disease, is really what this play is about. And it's been extraordinary. I would say a huge number, 75% of the hundreds of people who've seen this, have something like that in their lives, have taken care of someone who's sick, have experienced some kind of memory loss, have known someone they love go into a dark place where they think they can't follow. And that, to me, is why this is not only an extraordinary story of somebody rising above a terrible diagnosis, but also it touches on experience that almost all of us have experience of, which is what happens when somebody you love changes or disappears.
And to add to that, tell me about working with the rest of the other actors. Why this is such a unique, not only play, but also unique team of actors you're working with.
Well, we staged this production during the pandemic, so we had some very unique challenges. We could not be in the same room. In fact, we did this whole production without... I knew all these actors, and that was a huge, huge advantage. We were incredibly lucky that Jake and Nikki, the director, knew just like world-class people to do these jobs, who of course were available because it's a pandemic and nobody is working, none of the theatre actors anyway. And so they were able to pick their number one team because everyone was available, and then it was all actors I'd worked with before on other shows. So the fact that we were rehearsing over Zoom and then shooting on a platform called OBS, which is a little like Zoom, it could have been almost impossible to connect with people. But I knew these people, I knew how good they were, I knew that their performances would reach beyond the little box that we were in. And actually, we did have the luxury of rehearsal. Even during rehearsal, I felt that little box wasn't containing us. I was reaching out beyond the screen to really connect with those other people. And that's what... So it was an extraordinary... That one of the hardest things we rehearsed in Zoom looking at each other. But once we got to shoot, we had to look into the camera or to some very specific eye lines in order to create the illusion of the space that we were in. So if you turn the camera around and seen my space, I had sticky notes which had, where the paintings were, where the other actors were going to be standing, for it to look right on Zoom, which was very counterintuitive. But we'd had that 3 weeks of really rehearsing together. I already knew these people. I felt very comfortable with them. So it was possible. And of course, you roll the dice. It was kind of a new venture. But I'm really hoping that from the feedback we've got, people really felt that connection. They felt that relationship. They almost forgot that we weren't in the same room together. And that's what we were aiming for. Something that was so simple that sort of after about 10 minutes or so, you forget that we're not sitting at the same table or, and that I think was a tribute to the other actors who were just fantastic to work with. And Nikki, who was so deft in, guiding us through that, what worked, what didn't work, and really pushing us quite hard to overcome the limitations of that medium. So one of the challenges of this production is that we had to do, as an actor, you had to do everything. So you had to be your own lighting guy, you had to be your own prop master, you had to be your own wardrobe mistress, which is very good for us because it's, usually we have the amazing luxury of leaving those jobs to somebody else. But I don't know, I would think we just had to do it. So if you would have seen my setup, I had my screen, and I had all my post-it notes, and then I had all my props and my costumes all hung next to me. And I knew exactly where the edge of frame was. So this is where this medium, which was live recorded theatre, actually, it was very useful to have had the film experience I've had, because I knew how to work that frame and where the frame ended, which is something you don't have to worry about in theatre, but I knew how to hopefully work with that. So the technical people were amazing. I could not have done what they did. They cued us in and cued us out. So we had almost like a stage manager actually bringing us on, which is, bringing your square up and then taking you off when you exited, but also just doing all the timing of putting in. We had projections, we had, of Anne's paintings and pictures of her brain scans. And so all of these things happening at once. Somebody else was cueing those, thank goodness, because I couldn't have done that. But it was also amazing in that we were able to, the first weekend that we shot, we were able to run the play 2 or 3 times with all the technical stuff. And Jake and Nikki were able to give us notes, and we were able to go back and redo parts that we wanted to. So we had some of the luxury of film where you get to go redo something without the pressure of doing a full, well, we did do full live performances, and that's what you see. But just occasionally, if there was a technical hitch. I mean, one of the things we're battling, of course, is that we had to have everybody plugged into a router so that we had streaming without interruption. And, Leo, who played Dr. Miller, had one day where his internet kept going out and we kept losing these beautiful takes that he'd done. Or we do the whole play and they come back and say, oh, sorry, we lost Leo at the end. And so we'd have to go back and do those bits again. But that was in some ways the advantage of the medium. So we got some of the real advantages of running a play all at once, because things happen when you do that instead of chopping it up like in a film. But then we were able to go back and push in and just do little bits that hadn't worked because of technical stuff. But honestly, it was physically exhausting. I was on my feet for an hour and a half with, props, costumes, lighting, blah, 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 blah. And I had a big, on my wall, I had my big sort of scene list. Obviously, I'd memorized the whole play, but just remembering which prop to pick up when and where, which scene was, all of those things. And then one very unexpected problem was we were all mics, we had radio mics on, which were fed straight into the sound. But things wouldn't happen. I'm actually in my office garage now, and there are trees outside. And in the middle of one of our run-throughs, there was this incredible squawking noise, so much that the sound guy came on and said to me, Lucy, what is that noise? So they could hear it through my body mic. And it was that flock of parrots from Pasadena. And literally there were 40 parrots sitting in the tree outside the garage, all going, and we were like, we can't continue with these parrots. They were so noisy. So we had to go outside, and then we tried clapping, we were rattling things at them. Finally, they went away. But it's that kind of thing where you occasionally have the siren or a mobile phone in a theatre that interrupts you. But when you're standing in your garage, it's all, parrots will come and parrots will squawk. So I will always remember that moment.
What do you want the audience to get out of this play?
I really would love the audience for UnRavelled to remember that all forms of dementia are not necessarily just a terrible, terrible death sentence. That we could refocus how we see people with disease as, I think there's a tendency now to be like, oh, you're broken and it's just like a hill. You're going to go down the hill, you're going to get worse and worse and worse until you die. And there's nothing you can do about it and you're powerless. What I would love them to understand is that there can be tremendous beauty and even, weirdly enough, positivity in that disease. And if you have 10 years left with dementia, you could achieve beautiful things. You could achieve amazing things. We've seen this over and over again in the people watching it and the people who contributed to the talkbacks, that the bizarre sort of effect of this disease, as well as taking things away, is also to give back. And we have a personal story in our family of somebody who was a very, very sort of terrifying figure in our family, a really difficult woman, and who'd caused a lot of hurt and pain in the family. She got dementia and she lost all of that aggression, all of that meanness, and she became this sort of small, sweet, kind, caring. And it was, from her point of view, it was probably a very freeing experience to let go of all that pain and hurt. For us around her, it was also extraordinary because we were able to see someone who was really scary and broken and damaged just let go of all that and be really present. And she was able to, like meet her grandchild for the first time and take joy in that in a way that maybe wouldn't be possible. So even on a tiny personal level, I think also the big thing about this play is not only that, which hopefully is also to say we see you for the people who are caring for loved ones with this kind of disease. I mean, the amount of dedication and patience and just fortitude that caring for someone with a degenerative disease asks of someone you love is extraordinary. And I just want to say to those people who are the carers that you are seen, that you are recognized, and the extraordinary things that you have done, they mean something. They don't just disappear into a black hole. So yeah, and I think those are the most important things for me from the inside.
A similar question, but different. Why must the viewers attend the online Ravel play? Why must they?
I really believe that people should see UnRavelled because it's a little bit to do with the fact that we're all going to face something like this in our lives. We're all going to face a time when we're going to get older and we're going to change, and how do you negotiate that? I also think that we are all going to face some kind of challenge like this. As medical science makes us live longer, we're going to get older and we're all going to have these, but I think we're going to have, something is going to kill us, probably a lot slower than it used to do. And whether you're the carer or the person suffering, this is going to be our future, and therefore it's completely universal. And so interestingly enough, a play which on the surface is about neuroscience and art, or neuroscience and music, and the interface of those two things, is actually profoundly about being human. And one of the things that Ravel says, and I've not been very good at touching on that, it turns out that Ravel, who wrote Bolero, was actually suffering from the same disease at the same age, at the same time that he wrote Bolero. And they have this, Anne and Bolero have this connection over 100 years, which obviously is imaginary, but, well, maybe it's not. But it's the idea that you can have, like, who are you? Are you that which you do in the first 50 years of your life or the last 20? Like, how are you defined? We define people by, are they sick or are they well? But maybe we need to open up those categories a little bit more. So not only are we all going to face a situation where we might be a carer or a caree, I think it really asks some profound questions about how the mind works. And that's why Dr. Miller, the real Dr. Miller, is so fascinated by this. Because he's like, so can you turn off one part of the brain and wake up another part of it? Because that's what this disease seems to do, at least for a short time. And the implications of that are, go to the real heart of who we are. Our brains are our motors. If you can switch one bit off and wake another bit up, what an extraordinary thing that would be. And so these implications are so universal. I love people who watch this and say, well, I'm not creative, I don't paint, I don't write music, I'm not an actor. And you're like, yes, but maybe you are, but you just haven't discovered it yet. And I think that's what's beautiful about some of the patients that we got to interview, is that some of them were like, they were people who had no contact with this kind of world. They thought, I'm not an artist. I'm not someone who makes things. And then because of this disease sort of setting them free, they made all kinds of beautiful things, music, paintings. This guy who made these incredible sculptures out of stones in spirals. And the idea that who are we and how do we access those parts of ourselves, I think is like, that applies to everybody, which is why I think it's a beautiful story, because it could just be about a woman who gets sick and how her husband copes. But it's also a play about, like, who are we? Maybe you can be an accountant for 70 years and then discover you're a painter, or the other way around, so.
Why are institutes like the Global Brain Health Institute so important and needs the community's help and support?
Well, the GBHI, or Global Brain Institute, we all have brains. It's a completely universal experience. And it's funny. I think that we have this funny saying that we've had in our family now since we've done this play, which is, brains are the new black. It was such a huge mystery of being human for so long, and we're finding out so many more things about our brains and how they work and how they influence our behavior and our experience. And the GBHI was really formed to push beyond the sort of clinical doctor view of neurology, a little bit like something that like Oliver Sacks does, kind of take brain science and put it in the context of everyday experience. And because we all have brains, and because we are all, whether we know it or not, using them every single day, it's almost the most important thing we can do is to find out about how brains work and what makes them function well, and what can impede them, sorry. And so I think that the GBHI is reaching out beyond, you would only see a neurologist if you had a problem, and saying, what can all this science that we now know about our own brains really tell us about our whole experience, about being human? And they really want to answer some of those big questions. Dr. Bruce Miller is, one of his sort of primary interests beyond treating his patients is to explore how neurology and creativity go together, because he can see in the future that might be a way to treat people who have problems, or just a way of like maximizing, there's that old adage, we only use 25% of our brain, and what should we do with all the rest of it? And so this is really on the cutting edge of how science and art can work together. And I think we think of those two things as such different disciplines, and that there's no meeting place, but there are so many meeting places for science and art. And I think we'll find more and more of those as we go on.
Yeah, it's funny, when I interviewed Victor from that organization, he was, when I asked him why his organization is important, he actually mixed why his organization and theater is so important for people. That was really interesting how he melded that. Why are playwrights like Jake Broder and local theaters so important and needs the community's help and support?
I think that theater is essential, and the best argument I can have from that is that we have always done it. Since the ancient Greeks, we know how they did it. But, even before that, the reason that people, talk about how watching TV or listening to music got them through the pandemic is that we have this basic human need to have our experience reflected back to us in music, in theatre, in film, in TV, something which tells us more about ourselves or about being human. And storytelling is, the most essential thing that we have. We've done it since we were humans. And I think there's something unique about live theatre, because there's something slightly more passive about sitting back and watching a TV show or a film, and it will transport you. But there is nothing on earth like having the experience of going into a room and having an experience in the theatre or a concert or something live with all those other people. It's also the one thing that we've really been deprived of for the last 18 months, of having that communal experience. And doing it on a local level is so important. I love that this play, we had people watching it in Germany, in Saudi Arabia. You know, it does have a truly global reach because it's online. But I also think you should go into a small theatre in LA and go and see a play about brains and music and creativity and come out with your mind blown because you've just seen that, 20 minutes from your house. That's essential too. And that you should be able to gather again with small groups of people that live in the city you live in and have one of those experiences. And that's why theatre is essential and why we must support our small theatres and our big theatres in opening up again and showing live events. I think we're getting there slowly, and it's a bumpy road, but it is essential. We've done it for thousands and thousands of years. And I think we all felt that huge gap that was in our lives in the last 18 months of not being able to gather together and watch or experience something together.
Are you looking forward to see UnRavelled, the play, in a theater? And are you hoping for the same cast also?
I cannot wait until we can do UnRavelled in real life, as my daughter tells me, IRL. So yes, we are making plans now to stage this production as a live production. And as much as we got from doing it in the medium we did, because in some ways it's a play about isolation, so it sort of actually gained something from the medium we did it in, all of us isolated, but it'll also gain a huge amount from being live. We are hoping for the same cast. In fact, Dr. Bruce Miller, who's the head of the GBHI, was like, I like that guy who played me, you're going to keep him. So I think we'd love to keep the same cast. It'll obviously depend on availability, but we're actually hoping and looking into doing a production that may also go into a theatre in the UK. So there might be a different cast in the UK. I'm lucky I have both passports, so I can do both sides. But yes, there was a unique chemistry and a unique feeling about this cast. Also, that everybody there was exactly right. I felt anyway. This is from the inside. So it would be hard to do better. And also all of those people are all theatre actors and would know how to translate. Nikki is a theatre director. She would know how to translate what we did in one particular medium into the theatre medium. So fingers crossed, within the next 12 to 18 months, we will be doing this live. And again, also probably in more than one city, so that we can really give a wide range of people an opportunity to see it live.
I have another question. It's because it's what Jake said in his interview. Mm-hmm. Jake mentioned his pandemic players. He said he had a pipe dream of creating a repertory theater that would perform Max and Willie, Last Laugh, our American Hamlet, and UnRavelled with those 8 or 9 actors who would do all the plays. The company of people who he wants to work for the next 10 years, he says. Tell me what you think about that, and tell me why this group of unique actors is just the perfect theater team.
So Jake, the playwright, had this idea. Once we cast UnRavelled and we were able to use actors that he'd really already worked on. In fact, Leo, who plays Dr. Miller, I was rehearsing with him in another one of Jake's plays when the pandemic hit and we got closed down. This group of actors was so unique in their range and just their talent that I think it became clear that we could slot these people into a number of Jake's plays. And actually beyond that, what LA does not have is a rep theatre. We still have one in England, something like the National Theatre, where it does its own productions and uses, sometimes anyway, or the Royal Shakespeare Company uses the same actors for a whole season. And if you look at like something like American Horror Show, it's a very fun concept to see somebody, and also a group of actors who really have chemistry and work together well, translate that into all kinds of different plays. So I think the pipe dream is that this group of actors, plus another couple of people who have been very involved in Jake's plays over the years, would function as a rep company like that and would present a number of classic plays interspersed with Jake's plays. For instance, you would do Hamlet, and then we'd do Our American Hamlet, which is a take on Hamlet, and in the story of John Wilkes Booth. So yes, we are working towards that. We just had a reading of the new draft of Our American Hamlet, Jake's play, which looks at kind of what we remember, and so it's looking at memory and fame and what the kinds of things that make headlines, and of course in the context of the Booth family, where John Wilkes Booth is the one that we remember, the assassin, rather than his brother, who was actually a very famous actor, or his father, who was also a very famous actor. Why do we choose to remember the guy who shot Lincoln? Why do we glorify the shooters? And my God, we live in a world where that happens horribly often. And I think there is a sea change in the world saying, let's focus on the victims, not on the people who perpetrate these terrible crimes, and transposing that onto the story of John Wilkes Booth. So when we realized that we could pretty much cast 2 of his plays with the same actors that did UnRavelled, we were like, So I think we're really working on that. We had this reading. We did a reading in person. We did it outside in a courtyard of our kind of dream team to do that play, which was a lot of the same people. And I think that one of our 5-year projects is going to be bringing that to fruition, finding a home for it in LA, and having that kind of old-fashioned rep company that we would also want it to really be representative of the diversity of LA. Jake has always wanted to do a Chicano Hamlet, and so there would be some real opportunities to make it more diverse as well. We rehearsed Our American Hamlet with a really diverse cast so that it can really reflect the kind of actors that LA can offer, and I think that's truly exciting. Hi, I'm Lucy Davenport, and I'm one of the actors in the play UnRavelled. If you've enjoyed my conversation today, please come join us. You can find everything you need to know about the play, at unravelledplay.com. That's unravelled with 2 L's, play.com.
Thank you for listening or watching this podcast episode of Stage Explorations. To learn more about the theater creative and more theater creatives and artists on Stage Explorations, go to www.stageexplorations.com. Once again, that is www.stageexplorations.com. There is no space between stage and explorations. You may find more videos, podcasts, and information about this theater creative and other theater creatives and artists on Stage Explorations YouTube channel. Looking forward to seeing you in the theater.